The days leading up to the Winter Festival passed quickly, each one bringing new challenges and discoveries for Maya. She practiced more intensely than ever before, spending hours at the piano even when the coffee shop was closed. Old Tom increased their morning sessions, pushing her to explore new techniques and styles. Her playing grew more sophisticated, more nuanced, while never losing the raw emotional power that made it so captivating. But alongside her musical growth came a growing sense of unease. Richard Crane had not called again, but his presence lingered like a shadow. Maya found herself checking her phone constantly, half expecting him to appear with more promises and pressure. She had not called the number on his card, but she had not thrown it away either. It sat on her dresser in her little apartment, a constant reminder of a path she had not yet chosen. Sarah noticed the change in her friend. One evening, as they were closing up the coffee shop together, she asked Maya what was troubling her. Maya hesitated. She was not used to opening up to people. Her survival instinct told her to keep her problems to herself, to not burden others with her worries. But something about Sarah's genuine concern broke through her defenses. She told Sarah everything. About Richard Crane and his offer. About her fears of leaving this safe little town for the uncertain world of professional music. About her guilt over even considering abandoning the people who had shown her such kindness. Sarah listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her expression thoughtful. When Maya finished, Sarah asked a simple question. She asked what Maya really wanted, deep down, if there were no obstacles and no fears. Maya opened her mouth to answer but found that she could not. She honestly did not know. For so long, her only goal had been survival, getting through each day, finding enough money for food and shelter. The concept of actually wanting something, of having dreams and ambitions, felt foreign and frightening. Sarah did not push for an answer. Instead, she shared her own story. She told Maya about how she had once been accepted to a nursing program in the city, how she had been on the path to becoming a medical professional with a real career and a stable future. But she had been scared of failure, scared of leaving her comfort zone. So she had turned down the acceptance and stayed in this small town, taking the safe option of working at a coffee shop. She did not regret her choice, Sarah said, but she did wonder sometimes what might have been. The point was not that Maya should take the risk or play it safe. The point was that she should make her decision based on what she truly wanted, not on what she was afraid of. Fear was a bad compass. It would always point away from growth, away from possibility, away from the unknown places where great things could happen. Their conversation stayed with Maya long after the coffee shop closed that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what she truly wanted. The question felt impossible to answer. She had spent so many years just trying to exist that she had forgotten how to dream. The next day, something unexpected happened. A woman Maya had never seen before came into the coffee shop during the afternoon set. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and clothes that spoke of quiet wealth. She ordered a chamomile tea and sat at the table nearest to the piano, watching Maya play with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. When Maya finished her set, the woman approached her. She introduced herself as Eleanor Price, and she explained that she had been a professional concert pianist in her youth. She had performed in some of the most famous venues in the world: Carnegie Hall, the Sydney Opera House, the Vienna Musikverein. She had known success and fame and all the things that Richard Crane was promising Maya. Maya felt starstruck. She had never met a real professional musician before. She stumbled over her words, trying to ask intelligent questions about Eleanor's career, but Eleanor waved away the small talk. She had not come here to reminisce about her own past. She had come because she had heard about Maya, and she wanted to see for herself if the rumors were true. They were more than true, Eleanor said. Maya's gift was extraordinary, possibly once in a generation. But that was exactly what worried her. She had seen too many young talents destroyed by the music industry, chewed up by managers who cared more about money than art, burnt out by grueling tour schedules, broken by the pressure of constantly having to perform, having to be brilliant. Having to meet impossible expectations, Maya asked what had happened to her own career. Eleanor's face grew sad. She explained that she had retired from performing nearly 20 years ago. The constant travel had destroyed her marriage. The pressure had led to anxiety and depression. She had achieved everything she had ever dreamed of, but in the end it had felt hollow. She had traded her happiness for success, and it was not a trade she would make again. But, Eleanor added quickly, she was not telling Maya this to discourage her. She was telling her because she wished someone had given her this perspective when she was young. The music industry was not inherently bad. Some people navigated it successfully and maintained their joy in their art. The key was going in with open eyes, knowing the risks, and having people around you who cared about your well-being, not just your earning potential. Eleanor stayed at the coffee shop for the rest of the afternoon. She and Maya talked for hours. About music, about life, about the choices that shape who we become. By the time Eleanor left, Maya felt like she had gained not just wisdom, but a kind of mentor. Eleanor gave her a phone number and told her to call any time she needed advice. That evening, the festival committee held a final meeting to go over the logistics for the upcoming event. Maya was invited to attend so she could understand the performance schedule and technical requirements. The meeting was held in the town hall, a beautiful old building with high ceilings and wooden floors that creaked with history. As Maya entered the building, she felt a sudden wave of nervousness. The committee members were all local business people and community leaders. Serious adults with important jobs and respectable lives. She felt like an imposter among them, a homeless drifter who had stumbled into something she did not deserve. But Mrs. Patterson welcomed her warmly and made her feel included. The meeting covered all the details of the festival. The parade route, the food vendors, the ice sculpture competition, and, of course, the musical performances. Maya would play during the opening ceremony on Friday evening, performing a 30-minute set in front of the main stage. The estimated audience was around 500 people. 500 people. The number made Maya's heart race. The biggest audience she had ever played for was the 50 or so customers in the coffee shop on its busiest day. This was something else entirely. A real performance, a real stage, real stakes. After the meeting, she walked home through the cold evening air, her breath forming small clouds in front of her face. The town was already decorated for the festival. Strings of lights hung between lampposts. Wreaths adorned every door. A large banner stretched across Main Street welcoming visitors to the annual winter celebration. Maya stopped walking and looked around. This town, which had been completely unknown to her just weeks ago, now felt like home. The people had taken her in without question, without judgment, without asking for anything in return except the music she played. They had given her a second chance at life, and she was grateful beyond words. As she stood there in the cold, something became clear to her. Whatever she decided about Richard Crane and the record label, she would not leave this town behind, not permanently. These people were her family now, the family she had never had. And family was worth more than fame, more than money, more than any record deal in the world. She would play at the festival. She would give it everything she had. And then, whatever came next, she would face it with the support of the community that had saved her life. When she got back to her apartment, she took Richard Crane's business card from her dresser. She looked at it for a long moment, reading the words one more time. Then she opened the small window in her room and let the cold wind carry the card away into the night. Some doors, she decided, were better left closed, but even as the card disappeared into the darkness, Maya knew that her story was far from over. The festival was just days away. And beyond that, a future she could not yet imagine was waiting to unfold. The small coffee shop on Miller Street had seen many customers over the years. Old couples would come for their morning tea. Young students would sit for hours with their laptops. Business people would rush in for quick espresso shots. But nobody ever paid attention to the old piano that sat quietly in the corner near the window. It was dusty. Some of its keys were slightly yellow from age. The owner, Mr. Gerald, had thought about removing it many times. But something always stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of his late wife who used to play it every Sunday evening. Or maybe he just felt the piano deserved to stay. On a cold Tuesday morning in November, a young woman walked into the coffee shop. She was thin, probably in her mid-20s, with long dark hair that fell past her shoulders. Her clothes were simple but clean. She wore an old brown jacket that looked too big for her small frame. Her shoes had seen better days. But what caught Mr. Gerald's attention were her eyes. They were deep brown, almost black, and they carried a sadness that seemed too heavy for someone so young. Her name was Maya Santos. She had arrived in this small town just 3 days ago with nothing but a small bag and $47 in her pocket. She had no family waiting for her here. No friends. No job. She had come here to escape a life that had become too painful to continue living. The big city had chewed her up and spit her out like so many others before her. Maya ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. A small black coffee. She counted her coins carefully before paying. Mr. Gerald noticed this but said nothing. He had seen enough of life to recognize when someone was struggling. He gave her the coffee and added a small muffin on the side without charging extra. Maya looked up at him with surprise. A small smile crossed her lips. It was the first time she had smiled in weeks. She took her coffee and the muffin to a table near the window. As she sat down, her eyes fell on the old piano. Something stirred inside her chest. A feeling she had tried to bury for many years. She quickly looked away and focused on her coffee instead. Maya had grown up in a small apartment in the poorest part of the city. Her mother worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Her father had left when she was only 4 years old. She barely remembered his face. What she did remember was the sound of music that used to fill their tiny home. Her mother, despite being exhausted from work, would sing old songs while cooking dinner. Those songs were the only brightness in their otherwise gray life. When Maya was 7 years old, something happened that would change her forever. The old church near their apartment building had a piano. One Sunday, while her mother was at work, Maya wandered into the church. It was empty except for a few candles burning near the altar. And there, in the corner, sat the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. A big black piano with shiny keys that seemed to glow in the candlelight. Maya walked towards it slowly, as if approaching a wild animal that might run away. She sat on the bench. Her small fingers touched the keys softly. She pressed one key, then another. The sounds that came out were magical to her young ears. She had no training. No one had ever taught her anything about music. But somehow her fingers knew what to do. They moved across the keys as if they had done this 1,000 times before. The melody that filled the church was simple but beautiful. It came from somewhere deep inside her, from a place she did not even know existed. The church priest, Father Thomas, had been watching from the doorway. He could not believe what he was seeing. This small girl from the poor neighborhood was playing the piano like she had been trained for years. When Maya finished and turned around, she expected to be yelled at for touching something that did not belong to her. Instead, Father Thomas had tears in his eyes. From that day on, Father Thomas allowed Maya to come to the church and play the piano whenever she wanted. He gave her old music books that had been donated to the church. Maya would spend hours studying them, teaching herself to read the notes. She learned fast, faster than anyone Father Thomas had ever seen. By the time she was 10, she could play pieces that professional pianists struggled with. Her gift was undeniable. It was raw and powerful and completely natural, but life had other plans for Maya. When she was 12, her mother got sick. Very sick. The doctor said it was cancer. Maya had to drop out of school to take care of her. There was no time for music anymore. No time for dreams. Only the harsh reality of hospital visits, medicine bottles, and watching the only person who loved her slowly fade away. Her mother died when Maya was 15. After that, Maya went into the foster care system. She was moved from home to home, never staying in one place for too long. The families were not cruel, but they were not loving either. Maya learned to survive by becoming invisible. She stopped talking about music. She stopped dreaming about anything. She just existed, waiting for the day she would turn 18 and could finally be on her own. Those years were dark. Maya worked odd jobs after aging out of foster care. Waitressing, cleaning houses, stocking shelves at grocery stores. She saved every penny she could. But the city was expensive and life kept throwing obstacles in her way. Bad roommates. Lost jobs, stolen money. Every time she started to get ahead, something would push her back down. The breaking point came 3 months ago. Maya had been working at a restaurant downtown. The manager was a cruel man who enjoyed making his employees feel small. One night, after a particularly horrible shift, Maya walked out and never went back. She packed her small bag, bought a bus ticket to the farthest place she could afford, and left the city behind. Now here she was, sitting in a coffee shop in a town she did not know, staring at a piano she was trying to ignore. The coffee had gone cold in her hands. The muffin remained untouched. All she could think about was the piano. It was calling to her, whispering to her, reminding her of who she used to be before life broke her into pieces. Mr. Gerald watched her from behind the counter. He saw how her eyes kept drifting to the piano. He saw the longing in her face, the hunger that went beyond food or drink. He had seen that look before, many years ago, in his wife's eyes. The look of someone who needed music like they needed air to breathe. The coffee shop slowly filled with the morning crowd. People came and went, ordering their drinks, having their conversations, living their lives. Nobody noticed the quiet young woman by the window. Nobody saw the battle happening inside her heart. She wanted to touch those keys so badly, but she was afraid. Afraid of what might happen if she let herself feel again. Afraid that the music might not come back. Afraid that it would. Maya finished her cold coffee and stood up to leave. She had to find a job today. She had to find a place to sleep that was not the bus station. There was no time for pianos and old dreams. She walked towards the door, keeping her eyes straight ahead, refusing to look at the corner where the piano sat waiting, but just as her hand touched the door handle, something happened. The sunlight shifted, and a beam of golden light fell directly on the piano, making it glow like it was alive. Maya stopped. Her breath caught in her throat, and before she knew what she was doing, she turned around and walked slowly towards the instrument that had once been her entire world. Maya's feet moved on their own, carrying her across the wooden floor towards the dusty piano in the corner. Each step felt like walking through water. Time seemed to slow down around her. The noise of the coffee shop faded into a distant hum. All she could see was the piano bathed in golden morning light, waiting for her like an old friend she had abandoned long ago. She sat down on the worn bench. The wood creaked under her weight. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. 10 years. It had been 10 long years since she had last touched a piano. 10 years of silence. 10 years of pretending that part of her did not exist. She had convinced herself that she had moved on, that music was just a childhood fantasy, that she was meant for a different kind of life. But now, sitting here, she knew that had all been a lie. Her fingers touched the keys softly. The ivory was cold under her fingertips. She pressed down on one key. The note that came out was slightly out of tune, but it was still the most beautiful sound she had heard in years. Something inside her chest cracked open. Tears began to form in the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. She pressed another key, then another. Slowly, carefully, as if testing whether she still remembered how to do this. The first few notes were hesitant, uncertain, like someone learning to walk again after a long illness. But then something shifted. It was as if a door that had been locked for years suddenly burst open. Maya's fingers began to move faster. The music that came out was not from any song she had learned. It was coming from somewhere deep inside her soul. It was the sound of all her pain, all her loss, all her loneliness pouring out through the keys. The coffee shop went completely silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. Everyone turned to look at the thin young woman in the old brown jacket, who was making the most incredible music any of them had ever heard. It was not just beautiful. It was heartbreaking. It was joyful. It was everything all at once. Mr. Gerald stood behind the counter with his mouth hanging open. In 40 years of owning this coffee shop, he had never heard anything like this. His wife had been a good piano player, but this young woman was something else entirely. This was not just talent. This was a gift from somewhere beyond human understanding. Maya was lost in the music. She had forgotten where she was. She had forgotten her empty pockets and her uncertain future. She had forgotten everything except the feeling of the keys under her fingers and the melody that was flowing through her like electricity. For the first time in 10 years, she felt alive. Truly, completely alive. The piece she played lasted about 7 minutes, though to everyone listening it felt like both an eternity and just a single heartbeat. When the last note faded into silence, Maya sat still for a long moment. Then, slowly, she became aware of her surroundings again. She remembered where she was. Her cheeks flushed red with embarrassment. What had she done? She had just played a stranger's piano without permission in front of a room full of people. She stood up quickly, ready to apologize and leave. But before she could say a word, something unexpected happened. The entire coffee shop erupted in applause. People were standing up. Some had tears streaming down their faces. Others were cheering. A woman in the back was wiping her eyes with a napkin. An old man near the door was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Maya stood frozen, not understanding what was happening. Nobody had ever applauded for her before. In all the years she had played as a child, it had always been alone in that empty church. She had never performed for an audience. She did not know how to react. Mr. Gerald walked out from behind the counter and approached her. His eyes were moist and his voice was thick when he spoke. He told her that in all his years he had never heard anything so beautiful. He asked her where she had learned to play like that. Maya shook her head and said she had never really learned. It just came out of her. She could not explain it any better than that. The old man looked at her for a long moment, studying her face. Then he asked a simple question that would change everything. He asked if she needed a job. Maya's eyes widened. She thought he was joking, but his face was completely serious. He explained that the coffee shop had been struggling lately. Business was down. He had been thinking about selling the place and retiring. But maybe, just maybe, if someone played that old piano every day, people would start coming back. Maya could not believe what she was hearing. A job? Playing piano? It seemed too good to be true. In her experience, good things did not happen to people like her. There was always a catch. Always a price to pay. She hesitated, not knowing what to say. A woman sitting at a nearby table stood up and walked over. She introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson, and she said she was on the town council. She had been looking for entertainment for the upcoming winter festival, and she had just found it. She handed Maya her card and told her to call. Maya took the card with shaking hands, still not quite believing any of this was real. More people approached, wanting to talk to her, wanting to know her name, wanting to know her story. Maya felt overwhelmed. She was not used to attention. She was not used to people caring about her at all. For so many years, she had been invisible. Just another face in the crowd. Just another struggling person trying to survive in a world that did not care. But now, suddenly, people were seeing her. Really seeing her. Mr. Gerald could sense her discomfort. He gently guided her away from the crowd and led her to a small table in the back. He brought her a fresh cup of coffee and told everyone to give her some space. The crowd slowly dispersed, though people kept glancing in her direction with wonder in their eyes. Sitting across from her, Mr. Gerald explained more about his offer. He could not pay much, he admitted. The coffee shop was barely breaking even most months. But he could offer her a small salary, plus meals, plus the small apartment above the shop that had been empty since his wife passed. It was not fancy, he warned. Just one room with a tiny bathroom and a hot plate for cooking. But it was clean and warm and safe. Maya listened, feeling like she was in a dream. An hour ago, she had been wondering where she would sleep tonight. Now she was being offered a job and a home, all because she had touched a piano. It did not make sense. Nothing in her life had ever worked out this easily. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Mr. Gerald to reveal some hidden catch, but there was no catch. The old man was simply kind. He had seen something special in her and he wanted to help. It was as simple as that. Sometimes, he told her, life surprises you. Sometimes, after years of darkness, a little light finds its way through. He had learned this after losing his wife. Just when he thought he would never feel joy again, something unexpected would happen to remind him that hope was still possible. Maya agreed to take the job. What else could she do? She had nothing. No money, no options, no plans, and for the first time in her life, someone was reaching out a hand to help her. She would be foolish to refuse. That afternoon, Mr. Gerald took her up to the small apartment above the coffee shop. It was exactly as he had described. One room with a single window overlooking the street below. A narrow bed pushed against the wall. A wooden dresser with a cracked mirror. A small bathroom with a shower that took 5 minutes to produce hot water. It was nothing fancy. But to Maya, it looked like a palace. She placed her small bag on the bed and looked around. This was hers. A space of her own. A place where she could close the door and feel safe. She had not had that in years. The foster homes had never felt like home. The apartments she had shared with roommates had always felt temporary, unstable. But this small room above a coffee shop in a town she had never heard of until a week ago felt different. It felt like possibility. That night, Maya lay in her new bed and stared at the ceiling. She could not sleep. Her mind was racing with everything that had happened. This morning she had been desperate and alone. Now she had a job, a home, and people who seemed to actually care about her. It was terrifying, because now she had something to lose. And Maya knew better than anyone how easily things could be taken away, but there was something else keeping her awake. The music. She could still feel it humming in her veins, tingling in her fingertips. Playing that piano had awakened something that she thought had died long ago. The gift that Father Thomas had recognized in her as a child was still there. Stronger than ever, in fact. Years of silence had not killed it. If anything, it had only made it more powerful. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maya made a decision. Whatever happened next, she would not run away again. She would not hide from her gift. She had spent too many years being afraid, too many years letting life push her around. It was time to stand up. It was time to find out who she really was. The old piano downstairs sat silent in the darkness of the closed coffee shop. But it was no longer gathering dust. It was waiting for tomorrow, waiting for Maya's fingers to bring it back to life once again. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Maya had experienced before. Every morning she would wake up in her little apartment, make herself a simple breakfast, and go downstairs to the coffee shop. Mr. Gerald would already be there, preparing for the day, and he would greet her with a warm smile that made her feel like she belonged. Somewhere for the first time in her life, her job was simple. She would help out with small tasks during the quiet hours. Wiping tables, arranging pastries in the display case, refilling napkin holders. And then, around mid-morning, when the coffee shop started to fill with customers, she would sit at the piano and play. There was no set schedule, no specific songs she had to perform. Mr. Gerald told her to play whatever felt right, whatever came from her heart. At first, Maya was nervous. The memory of that first day, when she had played without thinking and the whole room had gone silent, felt like a fluke. What if it had been a one-time thing? What if the magic did not come back? These fears haunted her as she sat at the piano on her second day. Her hands were shaking. Her mouth was dry. The small crowd of customers seemed to be staring at her, waiting, expecting something incredible. But the moment her fingers touched the keys, everything else disappeared. The nervousness melted away. The self-doubt vanished. The music came flooding out of her just like it had before, powerful and pure and completely unstoppable. She played for an hour straight, moving from one melody to the next, each piece flowing naturally into the next like water in a stream. Word began to spread through the town about the mysterious piano player at Mr. Gerald's coffee shop. People who had never visited before started showing up just to hear her play. The morning crowd grew larger each day. Then the afternoon crowd. Then the evening crowd. The coffee shop that had been struggling to stay afloat was suddenly busier than it had been in years. Mrs. Patterson, the woman from the town council, came back several times to listen to Maya play. Each time she would sit at the same table near the window, order the same cup of green tea, and close her eyes while the music washed over her. After one particularly moving performance, she approached Maya with an official offer. The Winter Festival was 3 weeks away, and she wanted Maya to be the main performer at the opening ceremony. Maya's first instinct was to say no. Performing for a few dozen people in a cozy coffee shop was one thing. Performing at a town festival in front of hundreds was something else entirely. The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. She tried to explain that she was not a real musician, that she had no formal training, that she would embarrass herself and everyone else, but Mrs. Patterson would not take no for an answer. She insisted that Maya's lack of formal training was exactly what made her special. Anyone could learn to play the notes on a page, she said. But Maya played from somewhere deeper. She played with her soul. And that was something that could not be taught in any music school. Mr. Gerald encouraged her to accept the offer. He reminded her of what she had said on her first day about how the music just came out of her and she could not explain it. That was not a weakness, he told her. That was a rare and precious gift. Running away from it would be like running away from herself. In the end, Maya agreed to perform at the festival. She did not know where she would find the courage, but she knew she had to try. Her whole life she had been hiding. Hiding from her past. Hiding from her pain. Hiding from the very thing that made her special. It was time to step into the light and see what happened. As the days passed, something began to change in Maya. The regular meals and stable home were doing wonders for her health. The dark circles under her eyes started to fade. The hollowness in her cheeks began to fill out. But more than that, something was changing inside her spirit. The music was healing her in ways she had not expected. Every time she played, she felt a piece of her old wounds close up. The grief for her mother that she had never properly processed started to find expression through the melodies she created. The loneliness of her foster care years found voice in the haunting minor keys. The desperation of her recent struggles transformed into something beautiful when it passed through her fingers and into the piano. She started to make friends in the town. Sarah, the young barista who worked evening shifts at the coffee shop, became someone Maya could actually talk to. They were around the same age, and Sarah had a warmth and openness that made Maya feel comfortable enough to share small pieces of her story. Not everything, of course. There were parts of her past that were still too painful to speak about, but enough to start building a real connection. Then there was old Tom, a retired music teacher who came to the coffee shop every afternoon without fail. He would sit at the table closest to the piano and listen with his eyes closed, his fingers moving slightly as if he was playing along in his imagination. After a few weeks, he finally introduced himself to Maya and asked if he could give her some suggestions. At first, Maya was defensive. She did not want anyone telling her how to play. Her music came from instinct, from feeling, not from rules and techniques. But old Tom was patient and kind. He explained that he was not trying to change her style. He just wanted to give her some tools that might help her expand what she could do. Technical skills, he said, were not meant to replace natural talent. They were meant to enhance it. Maya reluctantly agreed to let him teach her. They started meeting in the mornings before the coffee shop opened. Old Tom would explain concepts like chord progressions, dynamic control, and pedaling techniques. Maya absorbed everything like a sponge. What took other students months to learn, she mastered in days. Her natural gift combined with proper technique was turning her into something extraordinary. The townspeople started treating her differently as well. When she walked down the street, people would wave and smile. They would call out her name and ask how she was doing. The woman at the grocery store gave her extra vegetables for free. The librarian set aside books about music history that she thought Maya might enjoy. For someone who had spent her whole life feeling invisible, this attention was both wonderful and terrifying. One afternoon, a stranger walked into the coffee shop. He was tall and well-dressed in a way that made him stand out from the usual customers. He ordered a black coffee and sat at a table in the corner, pulling out a laptop and appearing to work. But Maya noticed that his eyes kept drifting towards the piano. Towards her, she tried to ignore him and focus on her playing. But there was something unsettling about his presence. Something that made her feel like she was being evaluated rather than simply enjoyed. After she finished her afternoon set, the stranger approached her. He handed her a business card. His name was Richard Crane, and he worked for a major record label in the city. He had heard rumors about a remarkable pianist in this small town, and he had driven 3 hours to see if the rumors were true. They were, he said with a smooth smile. More than true. He told Maya that she had star potential. Real, undeniable star potential. With the right management and production, she could be playing concert halls within a year. She could be famous. She could be rich. All she had to do was sign with his label. Maya took the card but did not respond. The man's offer should have been exciting. It should have been the fulfillment of every dream she never allowed herself to have. But something felt wrong. His smile was too polished. His promises were too perfect. She had learned the hard way that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Richard Crane did not push. He told her to think about it and call him when she was ready. Then he left, driving away in his expensive car and leaving behind a cloud of uncertainty that hung over Maya for the rest of the day. That night, she could not sleep. She kept turning the business card over and over in her hands, reading the words printed on it. Record label, talent acquisition, national tours, album deals. These were concepts from a world she had never imagined being part of. A world that seemed as distant as the moon. She thought about her mother, who had worked herself to death just to keep them fed. She thought about Father Thomas, who had recognized her gift before anyone else. She thought about all the years she had lost. All the music that had stayed locked inside her while she struggled just to survive. Was this her chance to make up for lost time? Or was it a trap that would destroy the fragile peace she had finally found? The next morning, she told Mr. Gerald about the offer. The old man listened carefully, his face unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he told her something she would never forget. He said that talent was a gift, but it was also a responsibility. The world was full of people who had great gifts but destroyed themselves chasing fame and fortune. The music industry was particularly cruel. It took young dreamers and chewed them up, spitting out broken shells of who they used to be. Not always, of course. Some survived and thrived. But the risk was real. Whatever she decided, he continued, she should make sure it was her choice. Not the choice of some smooth-talking man in an expensive suit. Not the choice of fear or desperation. Her choice. Made with a clear mind and an honest heart, Maya thanked him and went to sit at the piano. She did not play right away. She just sat there, her hands resting on the cool keys, thinking about everything. The morning of the winter festival arrived with a light snow falling from gray skies. Maya woke up before dawn, unable to sleep any longer. Her stomach was tight with nerves. In just 12 hours, she would be standing on a stage in front of 500 people, expected to create magic with nothing but her fingers and an old piano. She got out of bed and went to the window. The town below was still quiet, the streets covered in a thin blanket of fresh white snow. Shop owners had not yet begun their preparations for the day. The festival booth stood empty, waiting to be filled with vendors and visitors. Everything was peaceful. But Maya's mind was anything but calm. She had not felt this nervous since the day. She had walked into Mr. Gerald's coffee shop with almost nothing to her name. Back then, she had been afraid of starving on the streets. Now, she was afraid of something different. She was afraid of disappointing the people who believed in her. She was afraid of failing when it mattered most. Old Tom had told her that performance anxiety was normal, even for the greatest musicians. The key was not to eliminate the fear, but to channel it. To use that energy and transform it into something powerful. Easy to say, Maya thought. Much harder to do. She made herself a cup of tea and tried to eat some breakfast, but the food tasted like cardboard in her mouth. She managed a few bites before giving up. Her body was too tense to accept nourishment. All her energy was focused on what was coming. By mid-morning, the town had come alive with activity. Festival workers were setting up the last of the decorations. Food vendors were unloading their supplies. Families were arriving from neighboring towns, their children running excitedly through the streets. The air was filled with the smells of hot cider and roasted nuts and fresh pine from the Christmas trees on sale at the corner lot. Maya helped Mr. Gerald at the coffee shop during the morning rush. Keeping busy was better than sitting alone with her thoughts. The familiar routine of taking orders and wiping tables helped calm her nerves somewhat. The customers who knew about her upcoming performance wished her luck and told her they would be there to cheer her on. Their support meant everything. Around noon, Mrs. Patterson stopped by to go over the final details. The performance would begin at 7 in the evening. Maya would have access to the stage starting at 5 to do a sound check and familiarize herself with the venue. A grand piano had been rented from a music store in the city and was already in place. It was a beautiful instrument, much finer than the old piano at the coffee shop. Maya nodded along as Mrs. Patterson spoke, trying to absorb all the information. But her mind kept drifting to dark places. What if she froze on stage? What if her fingers refused to move? What if she opened her mouth to play and nothing came out? These fears circled through her head like vultures waiting for prey. At 3 in the afternoon, Sarah forced Maya to take a break. She practically dragged her friend away from the coffee shop and made her walk through the festival grounds. The distraction helped a little. They watched children get their faces painted. They sampled cookies from a bakery booth. They listened to a group of carollers singing traditional songs near the fountain. For a brief moment, Maya was able to forget her anxiety and simply enjoy the festive atmosphere. The town had transformed into something magical, a winter wonderland straight out of a holiday movie. She felt a surge of gratitude for having landed in this place, for having found these people, for having been given this chance at a new life. But then she glanced at the main stage in the center of the town square, and all her fears came rushing back. The stage was massive, much larger than she had imagined. Rows of chairs were being set up in front of it, stretching back farther than she could see. A sound system with enormous speakers flanked the sides. This was not a casual performance in a cozy coffee shop. This was the real thing. Sarah must have noticed the change in her expression, because she squeezed Maya's hand and reminded her that she had nothing to prove. The people in this town already loved her. They would support her no matter what. Even if she missed every note, which Sarah did not believe for a second would happen, they would still cheer for her because she was one of them now. 5 o'clock came faster than Maya expected. She walked to the stage on shaking legs, feeling like a prisoner approaching her execution. The crew members greeted her warmly and showed her to the piano. It was indeed magnificent, a concert grand with gleaming black wood and pristine ivory keys. Maya sat on the bench and placed her fingers on the keys. They felt different from the old piano at the coffee shop. Smoother, more responsive. She played a few scales to warm up, then moved into a simple melody. The sound that came out was incredible, rich and deep and resonant in a way she had never experienced before. This instrument could do things that the old coffee shop piano could not. It could whisper and roar. It could express every nuance of emotion she poured into it. The sound check went well. The audio engineer adjusted the microphones until the balance was perfect. The lighting director showed Maya where the spotlights would be focused during her performance. Everything was professional and organized, which somehow made Maya more nervous rather than less. At 6:30, people began arriving in earnest. Maya watched from backstage as the chairs filled up, row after row. She saw faces she recognized, Mr. Gerald in his best suit sitting in the front row, Sarah and her mother beside him, old Tom with his wife, holding hands like teenagers, Mrs. Patterson bustling around, making sure everything was in order. But there were also hundreds of faces she did not recognize. Strangers from other towns who had heard about the festival or were just passing through. They had no connection to Maya, no loyalty to her story. They were just audience members expecting to be entertained. If she failed, they would simply be disappointed and go on with their lives. As 7 o'clock approached, the nervous energy inside Maya reached a fever pitch. Her hands were trembling. Her breath was shallow. She felt like she might faint or throw up or both. She closed her eyes and tried to remember everything old Tom had taught her about controlling performance. Anxiety. Breathe deeply. Focus on the music, not the audience. Trust your fingers to know what to do. Remember why you play. Not for applause or approval, for the pure joy of creating something beautiful. She thought about her mother, who had never had the chance to see her play. She thought about Father Thomas, who had recognized her gift when she was just a scared little girl. She thought about all the years of silence, all the music that had been locked inside her waiting for this moment. Then she heard Mrs. Patterson's voice over the speaker system, introducing the opening act of the Winter Festival, a local girl with an extraordinary gift, someone who had touched the hearts of everyone who had heard her play. Maya Santos. The audience applauded as Maya walked onto the stage. The spotlights were blinding at first, making it impossible to see the crowd. She walked slowly towards the piano, focusing on each step, willing herself not to stumble. She reached the bench and sat down. The applause faded into expectant silence. Maya placed her hands on the keys. Her fingers were still trembling, but less than before. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. And then she forgot about the 500 people watching her. She forgot about her fears and doubts. She forgot about everything except the music that was waiting inside her to be released. The first note rang out into the cold night air, clear and pure and achingly beautiful. Then another, and another. The melody that emerged was unlike anything Maya had played before. It was the sound of everything she had experienced in her life, the loss and the longing, the despair and the hope, the darkness and the light. She played for 30 minutes without stopping, moving from one piece to the next as if they were all parts of a single story. The audience sat transfixed, barely breathing. Some wept openly. Others sat with their eyes closed, transported to places within themselves they had long forgotten existed when the final note faded into silence. There was a moment of absolute stillness. Then the audience rose to their feet as one, erupting in thunderous applause. The sound washed over Maya like a wave, overwhelming and wonderful and utterly surreal. She stood from the bench and looked out at the sea of standing people, tears streaming down her face. She had done it. Not just survived, but truly performed. She had shared her gift with the world, and the world had embraced her in return. In the front row, she could see Mr. Gerald wiping his eyes. Sarah was jumping up and down, screaming with joy. Old Tom was applauding so hard his hands must have hurt. Even Mrs. Patterson, usually so composed, was dabbing at her cheeks with a handkerchief. Maya took a bow, then another, then another. The applause seemed like it would never end. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she realized that her life would never be the same after tonight. The anonymous drifter who had stumbled into this town weeks ago no longer existed. In her place stood someone new, someone who had finally discovered her true purpose. The standing ovation lasted for nearly 5 minutes. When it finally subsided and Maya walked off stage, she was immediately surrounded by well-wishers. People hugged her and congratulated her and told her how moved they had been. Camera flashes went off everywhere. Voices overlapped in excited chatter through the crowd. Maya's heart dropped when she saw Richard Crane standing there in the crowd. She had thrown away his business card, made her decision to stay in this small town, built a life that felt authentic and meaningful. But here he was again like a ghost from a path not taken. Watching her with that smooth, confident smile, the crowd around her continued to buzz with excitement and congratulations. But Maya was barely aware of them anymore. Her eyes were locked on Richard as he made his way towards her, moving through the people with the ease of someone used to getting what he wanted. He reached her and extended his hand. He told her that the performance was even more remarkable than he had expected. He said the emotion, the technical brilliance, the raw power of her playing had left even him speechless, and he had seen some of the greatest pianists in the world. She was special, he continued. Too special to waste her gift playing in small-town coffee shops for the rest of her life. Maya pulled her hand away from his grip. She told him she had made her decision. She was staying here. She was happy here. This was her home now. She did not want what he was offering. Richard's smile did not waver. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder thick with papers. He said he understood her hesitation. The music industry was scary and unfamiliar, but he had come prepared to address all her concerns. He had brought a contract that was unlike anything his label had ever offered to an unknown artist. He opened the folder and began listing the terms. A signing bonus of $200,000. Complete creative control over her first album. A touring schedule that she could adjust based on her needs. Access to the finest producers, sound engineers, and marketing teams in the business. And perhaps most importantly, a clause that allowed her to terminate the contract at any time during the first year. If she was unhappy, $200,000. The number echoed in Maya's mind. That was more money than she had ever dreamed of having. That was security and stability and freedom from the constant fear of not having enough. That was the kind of money that could change everything. But she remembered Eleanor's warning. She remembered the stories of young talents destroyed by the very industry that promised to make them stars. She looked at Richard's perfectly tailored suit and polished shoes and slicked back hair, and she saw a man who made a living turning people into products. Before she could respond, Mr. Gerald appeared at her side. He had been watching the exchange from a distance and had seen the conflict in Maya's eyes. He stepped between her and Richard, his old body straightening with protective determination. He asked Maya if this man was bothering her. Richard's smile finally flickered, just for a moment, revealing something harder underneath. He assured Mr. Gerald that he was just having a business conversation with Maya, nothing inappropriate. Just offering her an opportunity that any sane person would jump at. Mr. Gerald turned to Maya and asked what she wanted to do. His voice was calm and kind, without any pressure or expectation. He was simply asking, leaving the decision entirely in her hands. Maya took a deep breath. The crowd around them had quieted, sensing the tension. People were watching, waiting to see what would happen. She looked at the folder in Richard's hands, at all those papers promising wealth and fame. Then she looked at Mr. Gerald, at the coffee shop owner who had given her a chance when she had nothing. She told Richard that she appreciated his offer. Truly she did. But she had thought about it carefully, and the answer was no. She did not want to be a star. She did not want to tour the world and record albums and become famous. She wanted to stay here, in this town, playing music for people who cared about her as a person, not just as a product. Richard's facade finally cracked. His voice became sharp as he told her she was making a huge mistake. Talent like hers came along once in a generation. She could have everything: money, fame, adoring fans, a legacy that would outlast her lifetime. And she was throwing it all away to play piano in a coffee shop for the rest of her life. Maya felt her own anger rising. She told him that maybe he was right. Maybe she was throwing away a chance at fame and fortune. But at least she was making her own choice. At least she was following her heart instead of chasing after things that would never make her truly happy. She had seen what the world he represented did to people. Eleanor had told her stories that still kept her awake at night. Richard's eyes narrowed at the mention of Eleanor's name. He knew exactly who Maya was talking about. His voice became cold as he said that Eleanor was a failed artist who had crashed and burned because she was not strong enough to handle success. Maya should not let one woman's weakness define her own future. Something snapped inside Maya. She stepped forward, her voice rising loud enough for everyone around them to hear. She told Richard that Eleanor was one of the strongest people she had ever met. Strong enough to walk away from a career that was destroying her. Strong enough to tell the truth about an industry that preyed on vulnerable young artists. Strong enough to share her wisdom with a stranger, so that stranger would not make the same mistakes. The crowd murmured in agreement. Richard looked around, suddenly aware that he had lost control of the situation. His charm had failed him. His money had failed him. He was just a man in an expensive suit surrounded by people who did not care about what he was selling. He stuffed the folder back into his jacket with jerky, frustrated movements. He told Maya that she would regret this decision, that in 5 years she would be stuck in this dead-end town, bitter and resentful, wondering what could have been. And by then it would be too late. The opportunity would be gone forever. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without looking back. Maya watched him go, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She had just turned down more money than she had ever imagined. She had rejected a path that could have led to global fame. She had chosen this small town over everything the world said she should want, and she had never felt more certain of anything in her life. The crowd surged around her again, but this time with a different energy. People were congratulating her not just on her performance but on her courage. They had witnessed her stand up to a powerful man and refuse to be bought. They had seen her choose community over commerce, authenticity over ambition. Mr. Gerald put his arm around her shoulders and told her he was proud of her. Not because she had stayed, though he was grateful for that, but because she had made a decision based on what she valued, not on what she feared or what others expected of her. That was the mark of true strength. Sarah pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around Maya, laughing and crying at the same time. She said that was the most incredible thing she had ever seen. Maya had just told a record label to shove it right after giving the performance of a lifetime. She was like something out of a movie. Old Tom was there too, beaming with pride. He told Maya that her playing tonight had been extraordinary. All the technique he had taught her, combined with her natural gift, had produced something truly special. But more importantly, she had proven that she was not just a talented musician. She was a person of integrity. And in his experience, those two things together were rarer than diamonds. As the evening wore on, the festival continued with other performers and activities, but Maya remained the talk of the town. Everywhere she went, people wanted to shake her hand, take pictures with her, tell her how moved they had been by her music. She accepted the attention graciously, though part of her still felt uncomfortable with so much focus. Later that night, after the crowds had finally dispersed and the festival grounds were being cleaned up, Maya sat alone on the stage. The grand piano was still there, waiting to be returned to the city in the morning. She placed her hands on the keys and played softly, not performing for anyone, just enjoying the feel of the music flowing through her. The stars were brilliant overhead, the winter sky clear and cold. She thought about how far she had come. Just weeks ago, she had been sleeping in bus stations, counting pennies for her next meal. Now she had a home, a job, friends, and a community that valued her for who she was. She thought about Richard Crane and his folder full of promises. Part of her wondered if she had made the right choice. $200,000 could have done a lot of good. It could have given her security for years to come. But she remembered Eleanor's words about trading happiness for success. Maya knew that fame and fortune would not have filled the emptiness inside her. Only connection could do that. Only belonging. Only being seen and appreciated for her true self, not just her talent. Those were things that money could not buy. As she played her last quiet melody of the night, Maya made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to grow as a musician. She would continue to share her gift with everyone who wanted to listen. But she would do it on her own terms, in her own way, surrounded by people who loved her. That was success. That was what mattered. That was enough. 5 years had passed since that unforgettable winter festival night. The small town had changed in many ways, yet somehow remained exactly the same. New shops had opened along Main Street. A few old ones had closed. Families had grown with new babies, while the elderly had passed on to their final rest. Life had continued its endless cycle of endings and beginnings. Maya stood at the window of her apartment, looking down at the coffee shop below. It was no longer Mr. Gerald's coffee shop, at least not in name. The old man had retired 2 years ago, his health finally catching up with the decades of hard work. But before he left, he had done something that shocked everyone, including Maya herself. He had given her the coffee shop. Not sold it, given it. The papers had been signed and notarized, making Maya the official owner of the only place that had ever felt like home. She still remembered the day. Mr. Gerald had called her into the back office and presented her with the deed. His hands had trembled slightly as he handed over the documents, and his eyes had been moist with emotion. He had told her that she had brought more life to this place in a few months than it had seen in decades. The coffee shop belonged to her now. She had earned it. Maya had tried to refuse. She had insisted that the shop should stay in his family or be sold for money he could use in retirement. But Mr. Gerald had no family left. His wife was gone. Their children had never come. And money, he had said with a gentle smile, was of little use to an old man who had everything he needed. What he wanted was to know that his beloved shop would continue to bring joy to people long after he was gone. And Maya was the only person he trusted to make that happen. Running a business was harder than Maya had expected. There were suppliers to manage, bills to pay, employees to supervise, and 1,000 small decisions to make every day. Some mornings she woke up overwhelmed, wondering how she would get through another day of responsibilities. But then she would go downstairs, sit at the old piano that still occupied its corner by the window, and play. The music would wash away her stress and remind her why she had chosen this life. The coffee shop had become famous in the region. People drove from towns hours away just to hear Maya play and enjoy a cup of coffee in the warm, welcoming space. She had expanded the building slightly, adding more seating to accommodate the growing crowds. She had hired 3 full-time employees, including Sarah, who had become her manager and closest friend. She had even started offering music lessons to children in the community, sharing her gift with the next generation. Old Tom had passed away the previous spring, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82. Maya had played at his funeral, a beautiful piece that captured everything the old music teacher had meant to her. His wife had approached her afterward, tears streaming down her face, and thanked her for honoring her husband's memory so perfectly. Old Tom had always said that Maya was his greatest student, not because of her technique, but because of her heart. Eleanor Price visited often, driving down from her home in the city to spend weekends at the coffee shop. The two women had developed a deep friendship over the years, bound by their shared love of music and their understanding of what truly mattered in life. Eleanor had started writing a book about her experiences in the music industry, hoping to help young artists avoid the pitfalls that had nearly destroyed her. Maya had agreed to contribute a chapter about her own story. The town's winter festival had grown considerably since Maya's famous debut performance. It was now a major regional event that attracted thousands of visitors each year. Maya still performed at the opening ceremony, though her sets had evolved over time. She no longer played only spontaneous compositions from her heart. She had learned hundreds of classical pieces, jazz standards, and popular songs. Her versatility had grown to match her natural brilliance, but what had changed most was Maya herself. The frightened, broken woman who had walked into this coffee shop with nothing but $47 and a bag of worn clothes no longer existed. In her place stood someone confident and content, someone who had found peace after years of chaos. The sadness in her eyes had not disappeared entirely. Some wounds never fully heal, but it had been joined by warmth and wisdom and a profound sense of gratitude. She had never heard from Richard Crane again after that night at the festival. Occasionally she would search his name online, curious about what had become of his predictions that she would regret her choice. His label had signed several young artists over the years. Some had found modest success. Others had burned out spectacularly, just as Eleanor had warned. None had become the global superstars that Richard had promised Maya she would be. Did she regret her decision? Sometimes, in quiet moments late at night, she wondered what that other path might have held. Concert halls filled with thousands of adoring fans, albums that topped the charts, magazine covers and television appearances, and all the trappings of celebrity. It was impossible not to wonder about the road not taken, but then she would think about her life as it actually was. The friends who had become family, the community that had embraced her, the simple joy of playing piano for people who genuinely appreciated her, not because she was famous, but because she was Maya, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. One morning in early December, exactly 5 years after her arrival in the town, Maya was preparing to open the coffee shop when she heard a knock at the door. It was still 30 minutes before opening time. She went to see who it was and found a young woman standing outside, thin and tired-looking, wearing clothes that had seen better days. The woman's eyes held a familiar sadness, a heaviness that Maya recognized immediately. The young woman explained that she had come to the town after hearing about the famous pianist who played at the coffee shop. She was a musician too, she said. Or at least she had been, before life had gotten too hard. She was looking for work, any work, and wondered if maybe there was a position available. Maya looked at this stranger and saw herself from 5 years ago, lost, desperate, searching for a place to belong. She opened the door wide and invited the young woman inside. There was always room for one more, she said. Always a chance for a new beginning. As they sat together at a table near the piano, Maya asked the young woman her name. It was Lisa. Maya smiled and told Lisa that she had come to the right place. She told her about how she had arrived in this same coffee shop years ago with almost nothing, how a kind old man had given her a chance, how the community had embraced her and helped her become who she was meant to be. Lisa listened with wide eyes, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. She asked if that was all true. If someone could really go from having nothing to owning a successful business and being loved by an entire town. Maya nodded and said it was all true. But it had not happened by accident. It had happened because she had been brave enough to accept help, brave enough to share her gift, brave enough to choose connection over isolation. Maya offered Lisa a job on the spot. Not a grand position, just washing dishes and bussing tables at first, but with the promise of more if she proved herself. Lisa accepted with tears of gratitude streaming down her face. As Maya showed her new employee around the coffee shop, she felt a profound sense of completion. Her story had come full circle. She had received kindness when she needed it most, and now she was passing that kindness forward. The chain of compassion continued, unbroken, later that morning. With the coffee shop full of customers and Lisa nervously learning her new duties, Maya sat at the old piano in the corner. She looked around at the faces she knew and loved. At Sarah managing the front counter with her usual efficiency. At Mrs. Patterson in her regular seat, ordering her usual green tea. At families she had watched grow over the years. At strangers who had come from far away just to hear her play. She placed her hands on the keys, those familiar ivory keys that had given her so much. She closed her eyes and let the music flow. Not a famous piece that would impress critics. Not a technically difficult showpiece that would demonstrate her skill. Just a simple, beautiful melody that expressed everything she felt in that moment. Joy, gratitude, peace, love, home. The music filled the coffee shop and drifted out through the open door into the cold winter air. Passers-by stopped to listen, drawn by the sound. Children pressed their faces against the window, watching in wonder. The whole town seemed to pause for just a moment, united by the gift of one woman who had found her purpose. Maya Santos had touched the piano softly all those years ago, uncertain and afraid. She had revealed her natural musical power to a room full of strangers who became her family. And in doing so, she had discovered something far more valuable than fame or fortune. She had discovered that the greatest music of all was the sound of a life well lived, a life of connection, a life of service, a life of love. And that music would never stop playing.